Welcome to the Great Basin Smoke Dispersion Briefing for Friday, April 6th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen drier conditions across the Great Basin. Any storms we've seen have targeted the northern half of the region, bringing light amounts of precipitation to Idaho and Wyoming predominantly, with lighter amounts further south and into the Sierra. However, looking at the image on the right, you can see that this precipitation we have seen over the last 2 weeks is well below normal, even in northern regions. Looking at the snowfall over the last 72 hours, we've seen new snowfall in the higher elevations of the central Idaho mountains into Wyoming, with much lighter amounts down near the Idaho, Nevada, and Utah borders. The snow depth remains highest across central Idaho into Wyoming as well, with lesser amounts of snowpack, but still higher than what we saw earlier in the season across the higher terrain of Utah and the Sierra Nevada. The satellite loop from this morning shows westerly flow in a system off the west coast, which is pushing plenty of moisture and more of an atmospheric river event into the west coast at the present time. So we will see significant amounts of precipitation and very warm temperatures and high snow levels impacting the Great Basin, along with strong winds over the next couple of days. Now looking at the weather pattern for later today, you can see the significant amount of moisture moving across the Great Basin along with that westerly flow in this system well off the coast. Ventilation indices will remain higher over the southern areas of the Great Basin and a little bit lower as you move further north. And if we look at the wind pattern, the transport winds on the left, you can see the gustier winds are across southern Utah into parts of the Arizona Strip and into the higher terrain of the Sierra Nevada, with much lighter winds and lower mixing heights over the rest of the Great Basin. As we move into Saturday, this system moves onshore, pushing that slug of moisture further east. And again, we are looking at significant amounts of precipitation in some areas, along with very warm temperatures and high snow levels. So there will be flooding concerns in the low elevations and in the high elevations, really across northern and western areas of the Great Basin, which will stretch down into parts of northern Utah as well. So we will be watching this as, again, this is a very warm storm bringing good amounts of rainfall to higher elevations as well. Ventilation index on Saturday will remain quite high over much of the Great Basin with the exception of parts of northern Utah into Wyoming. And this slide shows really the reason why. As that system moves onshore, we will see very strong winds affect many areas of the Great Basin, where we will see wind gusts above 50 or 60 miles per hour over much of Nevada, into parts of Utah, and even into southern Idaho. Mixing heights will remain quite high on Saturday. Looking at the conditions on Sunday, we will see this system start to move eastward. Still some lingering showers, maybe slightly cooler temperatures up north across Idaho and Wyoming, with drier and warmer conditions pushing into the southern half of the Great Basin. Ventilation indices will still remain quite high with good dispersion. Looking at the transport winds on Sunday, you can see the strongest winds now shift to the north across Idaho, Wyoming, into the northern portion of Utah and northeast Nevada, and winds will decrease from what we'll see on Saturday, but will still be quite gusty, with wind gusts above 35 or 40 miles per hour in the north. Mixing heights also remain relatively high, obviously over the northern and eastern areas, and will be decreasing over the western areas where winds will start to diminish. Looking at the forecast clearing index for Utah, you can see today still more moderate range clearing indices over the western half of Utah, but much higher conditions over the eastern areas today. And then as those stronger winds develop on Saturday and move eastward through Sunday, you can see high clearing indices statewide. If we look at the overall forecast amount of precipitation over the next few days, and you can see the highest amounts of precipitation are into northern California and the northern Sierra, where we will see over 2 to 4 inches of precipitation. And again, with very high snow levels and warm temperatures, much of this precipitation will fall as rainfall, which will really increase the flooding concerns, especially on top of the snowfall we have in those regions. Similar conditions with less amounts of rainfall will exist over the rest of the northern two-thirds of the Great Basin. And again, we will be watching those areas that have the snowpack in the higher elevations and on the ground, with that addition of rainfall and warm temperatures that we've seen recently, the warm temperatures, but with the addition of the rainfall, we will see plenty of flooding concerns across the Great Basin over the next couple of days. As we get into early next week, we have a brief ridge of high pressure bringing drier conditions and above normal temperatures again to the Great Basin on Monday. So we will see some, again, drier conditions mainly region-wide, but these will be fairly short-lived. So on Monday, as that ridge moves overhead, we'll see the dispersion slightly come down a little bit with lower ventilation indices. However, as we move into Tuesday, we have another system brushing by the western and northern areas, bringing another round of some lighter precipitation, possibly some cooler temperatures in the far north, but generally near to above normal over the rest of the Great Basin. Also good dispersion as this next system moves in. We'll have another round of gusty to stronger winds across the area. Looking at Wednesday, that first system moves by and we have another trough moving in off the west coast, bringing some cloud cover. Still may be a fairly dry day for the Great Basin, but generally gusty winds and the precipitation will start to move in from the north and west. So good dispersion again on Wednesday. And on Thursday, that system tracks across the Great Basin. This will be a slightly cooler system than what we will see today and tomorrow, so we will see some higher elevation snowfall over Idaho and Wyoming predominantly and possibly into northern Utah. And again, the precipitation is targeting the northern two-thirds of the Great Basin. Ventilation indices will start to decrease with a more poor dispersion over southern and eastern areas and still good dispersion over parts of northern Nevada. Looking at the overall forecast amount of precipitation from Monday through Wednesday, still have some lighter amounts of precipitation, but again, mainly focused towards the north and western areas and much lighter than what we will see over the next 2 days. The 8 to 14 day outlook, which takes us into the end of the second and into the third week of April, shows below normal temperatures over especially the northern half of the Great Basin and possibly above normal precipitation in the north, but still those drier signatures for precipitation over the southern areas of the basin. That concludes our webcast for today. Check back on Monday for the latest updates.